D&D Dungeon Masters of Reddit, what is the most useless magical item you've ever given your party and how did they use it?
Wingardium Leviosa.
+3 Sword of Edward Tumbleton Slaying. Edward Tumbleton was a tailor in a nearby city. They discovered a sword that was very effective at killing him, just him. Neither the party, nor any other person on the planet had any reason to kill the guy. The party ended up killing him by blowing up his shop with a fireball. The sword was never used.
Wingardium Leviosa.
In a game I am in currently, our DM gave us a flask of endless water. It can produce water in a trickle, a flood, or deluge that shoots 30 gallons of water in one turn. Our cleric has just fallen from a bridge over a chasm, and through clever bullshitting our sorcerer has managed to catch the falling cleric with a web spell. As we are all racking our brains to figure out a way to save them, our cleric pulls out the flask and uses the water cannon mode to propel herself back onto the bridge using the web strands as a fulcrum.
Wingardium Leviosa.
I gave one of my players a delicious magical sandwich that regenerated itself each day as long as you didn't eat the crust. It didn't offer any benefits when you ate it, it was just an infinite sandwich. That sandwich became a character in and of itself. The amount of time that was spent talking about the sandwich, its contents, the flavor, etc. was crazy. Every player described how their character would ogle the sandwich whenever it was brought out. That character is gone for now, but she kept that sandwich right up until retirement. She spends her time in Candlekeep Library, devouring knowledge and also the sandwich.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Not me as a DM, but early in 3E days my friend's older brother was DMing a game for my friends, my sister and me. One of the items we got was rolled on the random table was a gust of wind fan. It was exactly what it sounds like. Wave it, creates a powerful enough gust of wind to propel a boat and possibly rips itself to tatters. Threw it in the pack and forgot about it. A few sessions later we're defending a town from waves of invaders. The final boss is a cyclops or an etin or something. Big bruiser, we see it approaching with enough time to prepare for its arrival. My sister asks us to all use our healing potions, then give her the glass vials, which we do. Then she turns to the DM and calmly explains how she takes the vials with her up a guard tower. She smashes and grinds them up, waits for an opportune time, then uses the fan to blow a gust of powdered glass particles into the
Wingardium Leviosa.
Etin's eyes. The look on this man's face. A cross between holy shit that's awesome, I'm so happy a story like this is in my campaign world now, and fuck, this boss was supposed to be difficult.
Wingardium Leviosa.
We were playing a campaign with custom items we all put in, they were reasonable, and someone put in a staff that whenever someone used it, it turned the user into a potato. They could still move and turn themselves back, but that was about it. So we were in a dungeon that was rather small. Our 6-foot barbarian was angry that he had a debuff, but there was a small slit in the wall that I hid an item behind, and our magic man went poof and rolled into the slit and got a key for a chest at the end of the dungeon. So yeah. Edit, why is Potato Rick the joke you guys came up with? Because it's the exact same joke that my friend made when we put the item in the game.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Ring of Fire Detection. Range, touch.
Wingardium Leviosa.
I had a merchant selling some knickknacks, and one of them was a ring of fire identification. If you pointed it at something it would declare in a loud, clear voice, fire, or not fire. Obviously useful when faced with illusory flames, but for some reason the party didn't spring for it.
Wingardium Leviosa.
We were playing through a pre-made campaign. At one point, the players retrieve a magical artifact, which turns out to be an orb of controlled dragons. It does exactly what you would expect. In theory, it could have been very useful, except no dragons were showing up in the campaign, so it was basically useless. It did, however, lead to a running gag where our most paranoid player kept attempting to control dragon random NPCs to see if they were secretly dragons in disguise.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Running gags are the best though.
Wingardium Leviosa.
They are. Early on into one of my group's campaign, we set up camp for the night and were eating. The warrior had made some cold porridge, yuck, in a pot right as we were getting surprise ambushed. How did he react? He put the pot on his head on which he had no helmet, he wasn't the brightest anyways, and negotiated a +1 armor buff for a trade-off debuff in his hit chance, -2. We won the fight and his character became convinced the helmet had saved him, as it had actually blocked a headshot, and kept putting it on. There were also many jokes had about him having some oats in his hair.
Wingardium Leviosa.
My group had a habit of giving items that sounded very useful but were the complete opposite. For example, our wizard was gifted a wand of fireball. As you'd expect, he was extremely disappointed when in the middle of combat he used the wand and fireball by Pitbull started playing mid-fight. One of my favorite gag items was a ring of teleportation. Every time you attempted to use it, the ring would teleport to the destination of your choosing, just not with you. Worst time to figure that out was when I, the rogue, was cornered and alone, fighting 3 wolves, which at level 2 was not fun. Edit, the first time it was used it teleported to the inn we had been staying at. And when we got back apparently it had been taken. So we never got to use it as a weapon and teleport it into anyone's brains.
Wingardium Leviosa.
That's the kind of player that makes the game fun to play XD. We once had a player who really wanted to be evil, so he made a pact with an evil demigod and basically became our biggest enemy. He had a flying carpet and a magic fishnet of which I'm not quite sure what was even magic about it. He was the most dangerous enemy we've ever had.
Wingardium Leviosa.
My groups have a tradition of gifting players useless magic items with a birthday theme on their IRL birthday. 2 of the favorites that I bestowed so far include a pair of boots that dropped streamers everywhere he walked and a ring that turned the wearer's poop into chocolate cake, which could be eaten to regain 1 horsepower.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Obligatory, not the DM, but our party's DM gave us a magical, mysterious bag. When we opened it, we pulled out a turtle. We reach in again, thinking there must be something else to this bag. We pull out a rabbit. Still thinking there must be something else, something more meaningful to this item, we reach in again. And pull out a 9 feet tall deer. It really was just a backpack that lets you pull out random animals. My bard proceeds to use speak with animals, then charms the deer to let us ride him. We named him Preston, and he's been our ridiculously massive means of transportation ever since.
Wingardium Leviosa.
One of my one-shot campaigns had all players at 8th level, so I wanted to give them magical items but not too OP. So one of my monk players wanted a decanter of endless water, so I changed it to a homebrew version, where it didn't do the stream, fountain or geyser things but instead it would pour endless alcoholic beverages. He could make the decanter fill with mojitos or margaritas or a Heineken, whatever, but only to get drunk. I thought it was harmless and fine, until I realized he selected the way of the drunken master and got drunk on command anywhere and everywhere. It was quite fun. I'm writing a new one-shot and I might take some ideas from this post, too.
Wingardium Leviosa.
I gave my players an alchemy jug. They had it for most of the campaign and mostly forgot about it apart from the odd joke, but when building to the end they used it to torture my main villain. They'd captured him, but he'd already enacted his villainous plot. To find out what it was and how to stop him, they used the jug to pour mayonnaise down his throat until he agreed to talk. That gave them advantage on the intimidation check they had to carry out, which they succeeded on.
Wingardium Leviosa.
A modified version of the 5e wind fan that only works once a day, and immediately looks tattered after use. So you can never use it multiple times, but it only works once every 24 hours. Now it sounds like a not bad magical item, but the only times it's ever been used is to show people what it does. NPC, hey, what's this fan do? Player grins, I'll show you. Useless gust of wind noises. It happened 5 times and then it got sold off to the underground scrapper they were working for.
Wingardium Leviosa.
They haven't figured out how to use it yet, but I gave my party a jar of kraken bait, full of rancid fish magically enchanted to attract a giant octopus when thrown in the water. The only problem. The jar is also cursed, and whoever possesses the jar loses the ability to open any door or containers that require any sort of twisting motion. They can't open it. This is what you get for seriously considering buying the ring that turns you into a were-crocodile and giving the DM a how the fuck do I balance this heart attack. And the best part. They never stopped to ask if the jar is even a twist top. It's not. They just assumed they couldn't open it.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Through the wilderness by a Dullahan servant of the Dark Lord who is using some bad mojo to bring back undead dragons. I track the Dullahan and we sneak up on the camp in the middle of this freezing cold wilderness. We start prepping ourselves and Ned, the CN sorcerer, pulls out the mask of the skull. For the uninitiated, it's skull mask that can fly off and eat an enemy's face. A Dullahan, on the other hand, has no actual head, instead relying on stolen heads strapped to his chest. The table all groan at the mere mention of the mask. People exasperatedly tell him not to use the mask. He ignores them and puts it on. Rowan, our less than moral paladin, finally pipes up. You know what? Fuck it. I use detect evil. Silence. The DM and Ned exchange looks, then he gently shuts his DM book, folds his hands, and takes a breath. You detect evil. We all stop confused. What? Ned. Ilfast tend to swap places randomly while forgetting to tell us, though both are so chaotic it's pretty hard for us to tell. So yeah, the item wasn't exactly useless and we were all much too powerful to need it, but its use directly led to a revelation that completely changed the story that we had been adventuring through for the past few weeks. Throws his hands up, look, guys, I can explain. You remember that staff that we found a few weeks into the campaign that was hungry for blood and I kept feeding it? Okay, so it turns out that was a ritual to switch places with the being imprisoned inside. My name is actually Ilfast. I'm a 1,000-year-old elf sorcerer who was imprisoned by the Dark Lord before his turn to evil. My imprisonment has driven me quite evil. Chaos ensues. Rowan is trying to find a way to not kill him and still keep his oath. Nyx, the rogue, is nervously picking at one of her many daggers, and I'm standing there with my magic, automatic crossbow and giant wolf trying to figure out what the hell is going on. As it turns out, I never actually met Ned. The entire time we were adventuring together, Ned was trapped in the staff. It was an awkward introduction after everything was sorted out, and now Ned and... Not completely useless, but a weird chain of effects nonetheless. So this is Pathfinder. I joined the campaign in progress as a dwarven ranger with a hit list and the social skills of a block of wood. The party included a halfling rogue whose impromptu resurrection made him an unwilling tool of Sarnry, a paladin of Sarnry with a penchant for moral loopholes, an impulsive sorcerer who is probably the best example of chaotic neutral I've ever seen. When I say he's CN, I mean it. At one point he attempted to recruit a band of adventurers to help us fight an army of demons. He immediately gave a rousing speech at the local tavern establishment of the Drunken God, leading to a chain of events that ended with a riot, 2 sunken ships, and an accidental guard kidnapping. So anyway, long story short, we are out in the wilderness hunting down his long-lost father who is being dragged.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Poor ducks XD. If you're an evil DM, you can get them used to it so they never bring food anymore and then put them in a duckless place. Have fun starving, boys XD.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Depends on how you read it. Summon, as in any duck within half a mile is summoned to you. There need to be ducks or summon, within a half a mile radius around you. A duck is randomly summoned. If there were no ducks before, there is one now. It might be out of your sight, quacking and standing behind some rocks at a quarter mile away, but it's there nonetheless. Congratulations! The ethereal plane, the seventh layer of hell, and the deadly ruins of the great archwizard Asgården are now infested with ducks, because your goddamn bard keeps blowing the horn every 3 seconds.
Wingardium Leviosa.
I used to love making magical items that were off the wall. I felt like the game's items didn't reflect the silly stuff someone would make if they had the time and manic attention to detail. There's a devil called a chiton. It's a chain-wrapped, chain-swinging, freaky pain-loving Hellraiser type. My party fought one in a dungeon. He's wearing a unique amulet that makes chain. You place a piece of chain on the surface, and the amulet starts slowly, magically, generating a chain of the same dimensions. It only makes 10 feet a day, but over time you could make a few gold selling mundane chain. I just thought it was thematic and interesting. The party left the dungeon, went to town, found a smith, and poured their entire life savings into making 2 links of solid gold chain that would make Flavor Flav weep. And I wept. What a fool I was.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Once my party got a huge beautiful magic sword which was improperly identified as a sword of ogre slaying. Instead, it was a cursed sword of ogre saying. Whoever wielded it would only be able to yell ogre at things. Several adventures later they were attempting to catch a thief who was evading them. They came up with the brilliant idea of setting the sword as bait, and just going about their business. Sure enough, some time later they heard ogre 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 ring out through the town and they caught him without consequence.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Reminds me of the Ring of Hunon influence from Volume 3 or 4 of the Encyclopedia Magica from 2nd edition AD&D. Whenever attempted to be used, it caused a painful burning sensation in the user's mouth that could only be removed by consuming 1d4 plates of rice. Edit, thanks to /u/maxmanta and /u/charlium76 pointing me in the right direction. Found the full item. Dragon Magazine number 156, page 27. Ring of Hunon influence. This jade ring is decorated with oriental characters, including Fu Manchu and Charlie Chan. It affects all food eaten by the wearer. There is no noticeable change in the taste, but 1 round after being eaten, the food begins to burn for 1d4 HP damage per round. Water only makes the burning worse, plus 1 horsepower damage for 1 round. Only eating 1d6 plates of rice will ease the pain. However, no matter how much food is consumed, the wearer still feels hungry an hour later.
Wingardium Leviosa.
The only thing you can wish for is more wishes. I had a recurring gnome character that sold several gag magic items intended to be used as pranks, including Ring of Invisibility. It's just invisible. It doesn't do anything when you put it on, and since it's invisible it doesn't even serve the purpose of being ornamental. Never Burning Torch, a torch that absolutely, positively does not light. It's also too lightweight to use as a club. Amulet of Spell Turning, literally all it does is spell the word turning out loud when activated. In common. In the voice of Gilbert Gottfried. Bag of Molding, a bag that causes mold to grow on anything placed within it. Oil of Slipperylessness, oil that is no more slippery than water. Lying Carpet, a carpet that always replies to your questions with lies? The drawback is that the carpet is sentient, so it's entirely capable of unintentionally telling the truth. Ring of Infinite Wishes.
Wingardium Leviosa.
In my last campaign my player got a hammer that shoots confetti and makes a party blower sound on crits. A dramatic moment happened where he had to put his pet owl bear down, as it was morphing into a monstrosity because of the beg. Because the creature was on the ground morphing, he auto-crit. The beast lies there, writhing in pain, trying to hold on to its own self for as long as possible. You lift your hammer solemnly in the air, feeling the weight of not only the weapon, but the situation. As you bring it down, you feel the flesh give as the skull has been pulverized from the transformation. The sound of teeth clacks against the ground echoing in the room around you. The party looks at the ground and a moment of silence consumes you all. Fee-you, party popper, 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 party popper.
Wingardium Leviosa.
I had a magical red rubber duck. Gave it to the party as a joke item because they kept asking for weird shit. Not one of them chose to identify it. It was an artifact-level rubber duck. Once it was part of your inventory, it would never leave unless it wanted to. It had wisdom and intelligence of 28, sentience and could be attuned. Nobody learnt that it was probably the most powerful item in my game.
Wingardium Leviosa.
In the first campaign I played, the party began their journey by finding an orc woman in a tavern whose baby was stolen, and what she found in its place was a knife with a weird symbol on the handle. She sent us with the knife in search of the baby. We spent hours and hours and session after session never using the knife in combat. We then found out that the knife would turn anyone it cut into a lizard. My character ate peanut butter off that knife more than once before finding this out.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Not the DM, but the guy who used the item. I got a corncob pipe that made bubbles. Seriously, that's it. Just bubbles. They didn't put people to sleep, they didn't explode under flames, nothing. Maybe it would make someone's eyes burn if they rubbed it in. We were assaulting a town and I was part of the crew taking the gatehouse. We barred the windows and doors and I put the pipe under the edge of the door and blew like I was inflating my own life raft in the ocean. Soon, bubbles were pouring out at the seams and the guards inside were panicking hardcore. One of them tripped on something and hurt himself on his own weapon. Once we opened the door, they came stumbling out and we cut them down while they were disoriented and distracted. Shortly thereafter, I traded the stupid pipe for various types of arrows at a Fletcher. I had that damn pipe for a long time and only used it that once.
Wingardium Leviosa. Wingardium Leviosa.
The druid had in the middle of the night and threw them all into a bottomless pit in the Underdark. They found a wand that creates a random and unique lock that incorporates itself into the substance it's used on. So it might make a suspicious recess in a stone wall or a brass-plated keyhole on a wooden door. If probed with lockpicks you would encounter moving tumblers or some other appropriate, but unique locking mechanism. The lock was still completely non-functional though. It didn't magically create a compartment, it just made a lock. Even if you used it on a desk drawer it never made a latch or bolt. So the drawer would open perfectly fine, while having a useless metal cylinder with tumblers that weren't connected to anything. If you successfully picked the lock, it always felt like a real lock despite lacking the physical pieces. It would make a soft chiming noise and the lock would evaporate. The wand was a training tool used by a famous locksmith to challenge himself and
Wingardium Leviosa.
his students. It had no practical application at all outside of that profession. It ended up being used by the druid, who had ranks in use magic device, don't ask, to constantly mess with the rogue. The druid would take every opportunity to wild shape into a small critter good for scouting and then place fake locks anywhere the rogue might conceivably try to use the search skill. The rogue's increasing paranoia whenever he found a lock and his overblown promises of vengeance every time a random hole in a floorboard wasted a minute of his time and chimed at him was a pretty good gag. It turned a little sour when the druid made an extra lock on an honest-to-goodness treasure chest. The rogue rolled a natural 20 to pick the first lock and got a chiming noise. Then he rolled a 3 and triggered an energy-draining trap that permanently lost him 5 horsepower. After that the rogue stole every wand.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Were you playing over like Roll20 or some such, or was your druid doing this while in the same room with the rogue, and your party was just good about not metagamming?
Wingardium Leviosa.
When playing in person, if you wish to do this kind of secret plays, you can go old school and pass a piece of paper to the DM. If you do this often enough, once in a while you can slip a blank piece of paper to mess with your metagaming friends, having them expect something but then there's nothing. But lately we just use WhatsApp/Telegram to chat with the DM and tell him what stuff we wish to do.
Wingardium Leviosa.
It wasn't D&D, and I wasn't the DM, but in one Vampire Requiem game, our party once destabilized the entire hierarchy of vampirates in the Caribbean with a jar of cursed peaches. It was enchanted to refill itself, and if the unfortunate individual who ate the peaches failed a fortitude save, it did a few lethal damage to their insides and they shit blood. We filled a crate, maneuvered it onto a rival's ship and claimed it was from a different rival. Full-scale war may or may not have ensued.
Wingardium Leviosa.
They were trapped in a pit with no way out until they found this old scabbard that, every time you drew the dagger out and let go of it, another one appeared, sheathed. So they started filling the pit with daggers while lying on shields and eventually got out. Then those bastards crashed the local economy.
Wingardium Leviosa.
When one of my players found a magic ring in the wreckage of a burnt wagon, he provisionally identified it as a ring of invulnerability. He spends most of the rest of the session swaying about like he's invincible until he is confronted by a veritable army of goblins. Combat immediately ensues and to his surprise he is quickly felled by javelins and scimitars. As he lays there bleeding out in the dirt, he notices that the ring is completely undamaged.
Wingardium Leviosa.
That is hilarious, lol. Does the character survive though?
Wingardium Leviosa.
Nope. That session ended with a TPK.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Ouch.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Yeah, a combination of bandit ambush, a forest fire and some unlucky rolls during a swamp crossing meant that invulnerability guy was the only one to make it as far as the goblins, for which he was grossly outnumbered and, to his dismay, under-armored.
Wingardium Leviosa.
I'm not well versed in the art of D&D, heck I've only read 20 pages of the rule book so far, so I had a question. If your character dies, then are they gone forever or is there a respawn system? Edit dang, I got way too many answers to read. Thanks to everyone who answered.
Wingardium Leviosa.
My DM sold as a town merchant of magical items sold me a battery ram the size of a pencil and would instantly enlarge to a battery ram requiring 6 people to use it. I never once used it as a battery ram. Playing a character with my strength maxed, I would throw it as a pencil and use the command word to basically use it as a rocket on enemies.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Just materialized and cast a saving throw. Think before you give non-combat tools to players. They can and absolutely will use them to break everything around them. Give a child a hammer and all that. A trinket that can excavate a 15 ft x 15 ft section of earth down to a depth of 5 feet. Turns out, I had also given them at some point prior a trinket that fills roughly the same volume with water. Also turns out that water can be frozen. Surprising how many problems can be solved with various permutations of the applications of those 3. For starters, anything under 5 feet tall can be suffocated if the person with the ability to freeze declares their cast as a reaction to the water being created in the pit. Anything around about 6 feet tall just gets its head kicked in while it's frozen in place. Fire as a hazard. Forget it. Spike pits. Gnaw. Traps. Pressure plates. Combat on stairs. Nope. Anything that allows line of sight into an otherwise enclosed space. Yeah, everything inside is drowned now. Need an attack of opportunity. Make everything in front of you fall 5 feet into that hole you.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Mug of piss warm chongo. Turn any liquid that enters its internal volume into, you guessed it, piss warm chongo. They threw it in the sea. And yes, while it would eventually produce an infinite amount of PWC, it didn't produce it faster than the various flora and fauna of the sea could consume it as current carried it away. The toils of all that be. Help not the primal fault. Rivers flow into the sea. Yet still the sea is salt.
Wingardium Leviosa.
For once, I'm sat on the other side of the screen on this. DM gave me a set of sending stones, which I got made into a nice set of earrings. Now, one of the earrings got given to some rando, and every one in a while I freak whoever is wearing it out by delivering ghostly and spoopy prophecies.
Wingardium Leviosa.
I think my own story is when we got a wish from our DM who was known to be very good at corrupting wishes. We wanted something that made us able to breathe underwater, so after some conversation, one of our players went with the following: I wish for a magic seaweed that turns us into mermaids, while letting us keep our stuff. The second someone took it, all of their stuff flew towards them. Luckily, the person who tried it didn't have a house, and they started choking, because they were still on land XD.
Wingardium Leviosa.
I was making things up as I go, right? So I gave my players a skill that would allow them to jump further. Booby gave them this ability in a small confined area. I gave my players a map for a corridor that went only one way. One of my players had found a friendly slime that had been made up, and literally the only thing the slime has contributed was learning how to play fetch.
Wingardium Leviosa.
I'm not the DM, but at one point we had a player who was a stage magician, so they got a magic hat that you could pull unlimited rabbits out of. Now the DM thought this would be useless, but funny little did he know how easy it is to weaponize rabbits when you're creative, and at one point we even pulled a prison break using polymorph potions and about 85 rabbits after a few turns, spent just pulling them from the hat. Not sure if this is what you're going for, since it turned out to be quite useful, but it was intended and a joke and is one of my favorite items I've seen in any campaign I've played.
Wingardium Leviosa.
I gave my party gloves of contrariness as part of a cache of rejected items. The gloves can only be donned or doffed if the wearer desires the opposite, that is, you can only take them off if you want to keep them on. If you need them to stay on badly, they keep falling off. The party never found a good use for them.
Wingardium Leviosa.
My party has been carrying around a wand of disguise self they found in a magic store bargain bin for over a year, and hasn't used it yet. Except that's not actually what it is, hence why it was in the bargain bin. It's actually a wand of disguise elf, which once a day can summon an incorporeal elven servant you carry out a simple task for you. I was so happy with myself for coming up with that one, and so sad they've never even tried to use it, so the pun goes unheard forever.
Wingardium Leviosa.
He attempts to stop sand pouring through a hole to fill the room he's trapped in. Every non-PC within 100 feet wakes up at dawn as an undead. The party is currently on a high-capacity night bus to another city. Roll initiative, fuckers. The spaceship you just cast a spell that has a portal to hell open up in its center, bisecting it. The two halves fall into the portal and disappear before the portal collapses. You're now in the middle of space in an asteroid belt with 4 hours of oxygen. Ideas, people. This one was of my design. You now take 1 pint of damage every time you pass through a doorway. This began the philosophical debate on what constitutes a doorway. Is it a doorway if there is no door? What about archways? What about a hole blown in a wall? This came so close to killing his character. Situation. In several campaigns I've thrown a homebrew talisman of wild magic at players that want to play magic users but don't know the game well enough to be as effective as other players. The effect is often humorous or detrimental to the party but occasionally allows me to shoehorn in a completely random plot branch. Wild magic talisman. When casting a spell, the user may elect to gain +1 to the attack roll and save DC of the spell, whichever is appropriate, and any dice rolled for the effect of the spell has a +1 modifier to it, e.g. a fireball in 5e would deal base 8d6 plus 8 rather than just 8d6. If the talisman is used, the DM rolls on the d10,000 wild magic effects table. In previous campaigns I've had effects such as: the whole dungeon is now covered in 5 feet of snow. The corridors are 6 feet high. The sorcerer's hands are now the size of dustbin lids. This is useful as completely breaking the rule of useless here, but here are some things I've thrown in to see what players will do. Spoon of sharpness. A completely ordinary spoon except the end is as sharp as a razor. Functions as a dagger. Horned longsword. The hilt and guard of this longsword is made of deer antler, which is inscribed as follows: I glow blue at the raising of bone. The blade inexplicably glows blue in the presence of undead or brothels. Lemonic dagger. The hilt is yellow, slightly sticky and smells slightly of citrus. The dagger may not have been created as intended. Born of this joke. Breastplate of R. Was intended to be a breastplate of archery, but the creator failed to complete the inscription in time. +1 breastplate. Wearer is forced to speak like a pirate. Singing sword. +1 short sword. Sword endlessly sings opera at excessive volume. Lyrics are often relevant too.
Hey guys, this is the Rogue YouTuber here. I recently had a big change in my life. I had a baby daughter. Here she is. If you could do me a favor and remember to hit the subscribe button and bang the bell, I'm hoping to really create a YouTube channel that really gets people excited and brings people the best, most interesting content collated from across the internet. I'm saving up to save my little girl to Carnegie Mellon Computer Science Department. So please remember to like and subscribe. See you next time.